it's 100% the opportunity
Yeah.
to harness now. What investment vehicle in today's market gives you a 15% return on your investment?
The landlords are very resilient.
Yeah.
You know, they've had so much thrown at them over the last 10 years.
Investing in buy-to-let is still working
Yeah.
despite all the headwinds.
Is now the time to buy? Does buy-to-let still financially stack up? That's the question we're asking today on Paragon Buy-to-Let Insights. I'm Jason Wild, I'm Head of Sales at Paragon Bank. I'm joined here by Hitan Kanatra, a Managing Director of Visionary Finance, and equally joined by Louisa Sedgwick, Managing Director of Paragon Mortgages. Welcome. I'm going to start off just with you, Hitan. Your journey into mortgages is a slightly different one to the norm.
Absolutely.
Just a bit of background, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I started off as a landlord.
Okay.
Over 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I realised that buy-to-let was the way forward in terms of investing. How do I secure my future?
Yeah.
Through property investment. And just going through that journey in 2005, I then thought, actually, if I know where the money is, I can become a better landlord. And so I decided to become a mortgage broker. So I'm a landlord turned mortgage broker.
Right, fantastic.
So 20 years now in the sector, and I've thoroughly enjoyed every moment of it.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
So from your point of view then, as a broker, but as a landlord, is now the time to buy?
100%.
Okay.
I think there's two schools of thought here. If you're a portfolio established landlord
Yeah.
that's got a good infrastructure,
Yeah.
that's got a clear, defined business plan as to where you want to get to, it's 100% the opportunity
Yeah.
to harness now. If you're a landlord which has got one or two properties that hasn't had the scalability or has accidentally become a landlord, they are the landlords that are becoming a lot more nervous about the fundamental changes that are happening in the buy-to-let space. So if you're the established landlord, 100% is now's the right time to buy.
Yeah.
If you're a one or two property landlord, you're thinking it's not worth the hassle.
Got you. Okay. And our clients that you deal with, are you seeing them actively out there looking at properties now, sticking to what they know or looking at diversifying into other areas?
So a lot of the landlords, portfolio landlords, is very much numbers driven. A lot of the numbers stack up. So when I first started investing, 5% mortgage interests were standard.
Yeah. Got you.
And you typically had the yields at 10%.
Okay.
We are now back in that territory. If you look at house price inflation, but if you look at rental inflation comparatively, you're at those sorts of figures. So you're getting 5.5% rates of interest, 10% yield. Now, basing your investment on yield is for me, has not been the right matrix to use. I've always used ROI, return on investment.
Yep.
So a lot of landlords focus on the fact that it's 10% yield, but I've always looked at the fact that how much return am I getting
Yes.
on the money that I'm injecting?
Got you.
Now, we had the Labour government imposing a 5% stamp duty for all buy-to-let landlords. You've got to factor that into your acquisition costs.
Absolutely.
So now acquisition costs are between 7 and 8% roughly to go in. If your return on that money that you're injecting with the 25% deposit, the 5% stamp duty plus 2 or 3% other costs, if your return on that is 15%, would you do that deal?
Right.
And a lot of landlords are looking at it in that way by looking at the fact that what is the return on my money? Now, what investment vehicle in today's market gives you a 15% return on your investment?
Yeah.
So for the portfolio landlords, investing in buy-to-let is still working despite all the headwinds, despite all the negative press out there.
Yeah, and interestingly, still seeing an increase in SPVs being registered year on. So I think that is absolutely right.
Absolutely. I think Hamptons issued a report recently that said that this year they're expecting to have between 60 to 62,000 new SPV forms for buy-to-let investments.
Yeah.
Last year, that figure was just over 50,000.
Yeah,
So it's a 20% increase this year.
Significant, yeah.
Brilliant.
And you find that most of your clients, if they're looking at getting involved or buying it, is effectively...
It's through a corporate wrapper. Yeah, I think the interest rate relief removal, that's played a big part. So a lot of landlords are incorporating their portfolios, going down the SPV route. But also it gives legacy planning as well. So what landlords are now, the strategy of landlords, it's evolved over time. So pre-financial crisis, the entry costs were relatively low. People used to be able to buy in, with a 15, 20% discount on the deal and sell and make money and move on to the next deal.
Yeah.
We had the financial crisis. Then we had a good period between 2012 and 2016, and which is the point at which George Osborne changed the dynamics.
Yes.
Then we had COVID, cost of living crisis. Now landlord strategy has primarily been invest for legacy.
Got you.
future generational wealth that you're creating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gone are the days where you can dip in and out of property quickly.
Yep.
You've got to have at least 25-30% margin, the reduction of capital gains tax allowances. So strategies are changing. It's becoming more generational wealth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
And putting it through a corporate wrapper gives you that opportunity to be able to structure it in the right way for your kids and their kids and their kids. So I think strategies are changing, and landlords are taking advantage of the softening of the market.
Yeah, in support of that as well, we're seeing the average age of the landlord is now reducing quite significantly. So even in as little as the last year, we've seen that reduce from early 50s to kind of mid to late 40s. So you are starting to see that average age come down, which again backs up exactly what you've just been saying.
Absolutely. So we've all seen in the press about, buy-to-let is dead, landlords exiting their droves, and, exactly what you said there, that perhaps some of those kind of smaller time landlords, perhaps your old kind of let to buy, you could see some of those exiting the market. But invariably what we tend to see is those larger portfolio landlords looking at building and just going out there and buying properties, because the bottom line is there aren't enough properties to go around at the moment. We're not getting anywhere near our building targets either, and I don't personally think we will at any point in the immediate future. So kind of when you look at the economics of it, there just aren't enough homes to go around.
100%. And I think that's the fundamentals. I think if you wouldn't, supply and demand.
Absolutely.
Basic economic lesson. If you're not building enough, but then the rental demand's still there.
Yes.
If you look at rental inflation this year, 8.8% growth in rental inflation just this year, year to date.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which is a huge
and that's the lowest in quite a significant number of years. So yeah, you can still see there's it's really strong.
Absolutely. And do you see any potential headwinds coming up? I'll ask you first, Louisa, on this, that may alter landlords' appetite for further investment.
So we know the landlords are very resilient. They've had so much thrown at them over the last 10 years that those that have left, as you quite rightly say, are probably the hobbyists. So those ones that have got this for future and and run this as a business are very resilient. I think we're going to face into some challenges around the Renters' Rights Bill. The likelihood is that will be implemented as is. So that what was in the old Renters Reform Bill is likely to be implemented as is. Whether or not they take a phased approach to that or whether they just implement it on day one is yet to be seen. So I think that might add a little bit of caution around the landlord community. So I think there's that. And then, of course, there's the potential of the EPC changes that, again, are afoot. We don't know what that looks like just yet. We don't know what level of support the landlords are going to get around those EPC improvements. So I think those two would be the biggest things that I would think that landlords would be nervous about. But notwithstanding that, we've still got 21 households for every new tenancy. We know that there's a distinct shortage of properties. We know that there's a massive waiting list for social housing. So notwithstanding all of the challenges that they may face in the short to medium term future, I still think that landlords are still committed to invest because this is their long term future.
And so to you. So again, from a landlord's point of view, anything that would, because you're looking at it from both angles, from the broker, obviously dealing with your own clients, but for yourself, is there anything that you look at that would deter any further investment?
Not really. No. Not really. I think if you've got an established portfolio, you've got the infrastructure, you've got the economies of scale as a business.
Okay.
You're going to make it work. I mean, if you think about when buy-to-lets became prominent, in the early 2000s, how much headwind has the sector faced?
Absolutely. Huge amount.
We've had, since 2010, we've had 118 new pieces of legislation, over 180 new pieces of legislation that has come into effect.
Yeah.
But yet that has not deterred the professional landlords. So the market in terms of the professional landlord space will become smaller.
Okay.
But they will still continue to buy because there is an opportunity, and we've got a structural deficit in terms of decent, good quality rental stock.
Yeah, and I think that's a point that's often overlooked there is, things like the Renters' Rights Bill, etc. I mean, ultimately what it will do, there will be some headwind there, but it's going to improve the quality of stock that's available in the private rental sector. And, I'm sure we all have, seen some properties that you do beg a belief that some people actually reside in those properties. And it's quite sad in this day and age that we have that. So I think, as an industry, whether or not you're working on the mortgage side, whether or not you're working, on the bank side where we're letting agents, etc. I think everyone's got a duty of care there to try and drive the standards of accommodation up.
I guess the frustration is, though, the sector is full of good landlords. It's the bad landlords,
Which is the minority, unfortunately. Yeah.
and it's how do you move away from that negative narrative to a positive narrative that landlords just want to do what they want to do best, provide good quality accommodation.
Absolutely.
And we're certainly seeing that. We've got a lot of landlords that spend a lot of money
Yes.
when they acquire a property to get it up to standard,
Yeah.
and then they rent it out to long-term tenancies. But it's those small minority of landlords
Yeah.
where we just need to move the narrative away from those landlords to the ones that are doing it well and are doing it properly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that the database that the government are looking to implement will help in that.
Right.
If every landlord is on the database, then quite quickly you'll find out that you know, the wheat from the chaff. So absolutely, those good ones will thrive as a result of the database, and less so those potential unscrupulous landlords that unfortunately still exist.
Yeah. And have you seen any sort of changes in landlord sort of trends, you know, the types of properties that they're looking at, types of areas that they're looking at?
I think there's a greater shift in the northern regions.
Okay.
Just because the yields and numbers are working far greater.
Yep.
London seems to have its headwinds massively in terms of asset values, in terms of rents, in terms of local authority restrictions as well. I mean, if you think about London, they've got over 30 different local authorities and 30 different rules. You know, so you've got one property in one local authority and another one. You've got two separate rules to go off of. So there are challenges around that. But I think that the numbers are far superior the more north you go. And landlords are recognising that.
I think it's largely because I live there. just obviously.
Yeah. And you know, when we're talking about energy, you know, efficient properties, have you seen any drive towards new builds?
Again, I think with landlords, it comes down to numbers. On new build, you've got the new build premium that you're paying. Landlords are very aware of that. Are there landlords negotiating with developer exits? So saying, well, I've got your 5 units here. Can you take these 5 units? We can give you a 10, 15, 20% discount. Absolutely, that's happening.
Yeah.
But are experienced landlords entering into the new build space? No, they're not.
Right. Okay.
They're seeing value in second-hand old stock where some landlords are getting, you know, smaller landlords are getting rid of them. Let's acquire these properties and make them fit for purpose so that we can get long-term tenancies secured in London.
And from your point of view, from a broker side of things, what exactly are you looking at when you're looking at placing finance? What are you looking for from a lender?
I think it's balancing out the lender being open-minded of the different tenancy types. So corporate lets have become very popular. Local authority lets have also become very popular as well because they're guaranteed rents essentially. They're giving that landlord that security. But then what we tend to look at for our sort of clients is the overall cost of that mortgage.
Sure, yeah.
I remember the days when we used to pay 999 in product fees, and when that went up to 1.5% and 2%, we were up in arms about it. You know, how the hell are we going to be able to afford this? You know, how a landlord's going to be able to pay this? You know, that seems cheap compared to now.
Absolutely.
You know, we've had certain lenders that have been at 9.9% product fees, and you think, how the hell do you justify that? But the reality is the numbers for the lenders have got to work.
Absolutely.
And again, landlords are just factoring that into their acquisition costs. They can make some offsets against it in terms of tax. So again, they're just looking at the hardcore numbers. What is my return on investment? What is the yield that I'm getting? And then determining their investment decision purely on the facts and the numbers that are there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you know, it's not a lot of them. The way they look at it, it's not rocket science. Do the numbers work on it?
Yeah, makes absolute sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. And any advice for any landlords looking at getting into the market? Because, you know, we've spoken, you know, about that kind of more professional end of the market, but, you know, there are still new entrants coming into it. Any advice for anyone?
I think there's headwind within the pension space. There's a lot of talk about the government, you know, taxing pensions in a different way and making it sort of part of their estate. If you have got a sizable pension pot, and you're thinking you can make the drawdown of 25%, because I was talking the budget of them removing that 25% reduction and reducing it down to £100,000. It may be worth you considering looking to extract that money and putting it into a project, because at least you can touch and feel that investment. So there's a lot of money sitting within pension funds, and if the tax rules change on that, does that then make buy-to-let even more attractive? Because anyone will look at that and think, I can touch and feel this investment.
Absolutely.
Whereas pension, the rules can change, which means essentially you've got no control of the outcome.
Okay. That's brilliant.
So you asked the question, is now the time to buy? And you said absolutely yes. I'm on board. I'm convinced. I think now is.
Have I convinced you?
You have convinced me. I was already convinced, but you've convinced me even more. I think that was great.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And again, we'd like to hear your views in relation to this. And I'd like to take the time to thank Hiten for joining us today, and equally thank you, Louisa. That's all for today on Paragon Buy-to-Let Insights. And again, we'd like to hear your comments of what you want us to discuss next. So feel free to put those in the comments below. Thank you very much.